Guys, my name is Alex. I'm going to spend a minute talking about who I am and why I feel like I'm qualified to talk about this stuff, and then I'm going to go right into the point of the video, which is what you can do as a volunteer slash activist slash organizer slash whatever to make sure that the Bernie campaign is as successful as possibly can be when it arrives in your area. So, my name is Alex Franklin. I'm a delegate from the 6th Congressional District in Illinois in a place called DuPage County. It's a suburb right outside of Chicago, and it's traditionally a very conservative suburb. It's been an uphill battle for us as Democrats and lefties for a while now. When the Sanders campaign arrived, we were able to win that county despite all expectations and all odds because we had done the right things, well, mostly the right things, organizing in the months prior to the campaign arriving. So, basically, as a volunteer, as an organizer, you got two stages of the campaign, right? Campaign is very different style than when you're doing activism stuff, right? When you're doing activism stuff, when you're trying to call attention to a cause, that's the time when you can kind of think outside of the box. That's when you really want to be networking with people, going to things like rallies, social media stuff, having events, and kind of finding the people who are going to naturally fall into your circle as organizers. You know, people who, you know, they don't just post in the vacuum, you know, they actually tangibly do stuff. And that's not a slight to anyone who does Facebook posts. I'm just saying, like, there's a difference between trying to raise awareness of something and there's a difference of trying to actually hit concrete goals with something. And with a campaign, you've got a finite amount of time to hit those goals, and every minute is critical. So, one of the reasons why I feel like we were successful where I was is because we had the benefit of, first off, we started organizing in August. I was lucky to meet a lot of other people who felt the same way about things as I did and have the guidance of people who were experienced with our local political system and the difficulties of it so that we were able to get around it. By the time the campaign arrived in our area, we were already pretty disciplined. We already had an idea of what didn't work for us and what does work for us, so we were able to plug in right in with what the campaign was trying to do. And that's how we were able to take the county. So a minute ago, I discussed how there's two different periods of what you're trying to achieve with the campaign. Now, prior to campaign arrival, like I said, you're going to be organizing, you're going to be going to things like rallies and marches, and getting the word out there. By the time the campaign arrives in your state, you should have a pretty good idea of who your people are, who's going to meetings with you, who's going to debate watch parties, who makes phone bank calls, who helped you get the president or get Sanders on the ballot, who is a delegate or was trying to be a delegate. These are the people who have been consistently working with you. These are the people you want to have in your network, right? You want to make sure that you don't have anyone who has any personal animosity with anybody. You want to make sure that people are, you know, generally agreeable with each other, because these people are more or less likely going to be ending up your volunteer team once the campaign arrives and starts giving you direction. So, speaking from personal experience, we had about 3 weeks before the primary when the campaign arrived. Within those 3 weeks, we had certain goals that the campaign assigned to us in terms of the amount of people we should be calling and who we should be calling. We had a certain protocol for where we should be going when we were doing canvassing work, and we had certain deadlines for what numbers we had to meet for those two things, right? Now, for those of you who have never worked on a political campaign before, I know a lot of us are freestyling this stuff, and I know a lot of us, you know, before the campaign arrives, we might be a little set in our ways. Like, doing flyering, doing social media posts, organizing that way, it's great to cause awareness. But the problem with those things is you don't have a reliable way of tracking numbers. And campaigns, unfortunately, are all about numbers. You see the polls can be misleading, but, you know, what you're trying to do is to fill out that speculation of who is going to vote for Bernie, who might vote for Bernie, and who you don't even want to bother wasting your time with. Okay, so up to this point, if the campaign hasn't arrived in your area yet, keep trying to focus on getting the word out, letting people know that there's a network there for them to plug into, and that they're not alone in the wilderness there. Once the campaign does arrive, I highly advise that even if something seems difficult, if something seems a little weird to you, or if it's something that makes you uncomfortable, You have a limited amount of time to make the most impact, and the best way you're going to do that is by taking the campaign's word. They have a design here, they have a game plan, and it is completely relying on the volunteer networks to go along with it in order for it to be successful. Okay, when they say grassroots campaign, this is really what that is. The paid staffing people, they are, they're the people who know exactly what they have to do, how they have to do it, and they're going to be great in instructing you on how to do it. But the plan only works if you guys can commit to what they're asking. So, a little bit of structure here. So, within the first 3 weeks, well, you probably only will have 3 weeks. It might be different from where you are, from where I am. But they're going to ask you to fill a couple roles within your organizations. They're going to look for somebody who can commit to making sure phone banking gets done on a certain consistent level every day, right? So, example, that title is going to be called Phone Bank Captain. For some reason, everything's a captain. I don't know why. But yeah, Phone Bank Captain is going to be in charge of making sure that volunteers, whoever they might be, make a certain amount of phone calls to a certain amount of people within their region. So if you were calling out of state before, like say you were in Ohio and you were calling for Illinois or vice versa, once the campaign arrived in those respective states, we shifted gears and we called exclusively within your state. So once the campaign is there, or the campaign is about to be there, make sure that you start gearing up your focus on your own area rather than the outside areas, right? Previous primary states will be calling for you as well, but you got to be the epicenter here of your own respective state, county, whatever. So it can be a little bit daunting. It's going to seem like a lot of phone calls, but if you have like 4 or 5 solid volunteers, the way they're going to break this down is regionally. So once they get into the state, they're going to divide everything up and they're going to give you a little piece of what you have to call. So like for example, in my state, when I was in like DuPage County, worried about DuPage County. Kane County, worried about Kane County, so on and so forth. That way we were able to hit the needed amount of phone calls and reach out to the right amount of people, and we were able to hit those goals, even if they seemed daunting at the time. So that's one of the things you're going to have to focus on. Make sure that you have people who can commit, not maybe, not, if they're no-shows or if they generally don't show up. Don't rely on those people to be making your phone calls or being your volunteers. You want to make sure you have people who are committed, even if they can commit a couple hours a day. You can break those up into shifts and you can get those margins met so that week by week, as you approach primary day, you will be hitting the goals the campaign set for you instead of backtracking and trying to figure out, who you should be working with or who, you shouldn't be calling. Another thing, they might do this differently if they arrive at your area, but what they had us doing as volunteers was we were doing a 2-to-1 ratio a lot of the time where we were calling people who had signed up to be volunteers and trying to bring them into our offices or into our staging locations so we had more reliable people coming into the campaign to narrow out the work and get the numbers met as we approach the primary. They might have you doing something different, but chances are they'll be having some of you guys making calls on LiveVox or Hub Dialer, whatever they're using. I'm pretty sure we're sticking with LiveVox nationally now, and reaching out to voters we haven't interacted with. And then they'll be having you making calls to volunteers, people who signed up, who said they want to do something, they just don't know what it is, and getting them into the office to do stuff for you and to help the campaign out. Second thing they'll probably be having you doing is canvassing. Now, I want to be very, very clear about this. Canvassing is one of the most important things you can do next to making phone calls. It's probably the most important thing you can do. Every face-to-face interaction we have with people is way more valuable than a Facebook post. It's way more valuable than a march. It's way more valuable than a rally. These things are great. These things are fun, but you're operating inside an echo chamber, right? You're already working and interacting with people who agree with you, who you know are going to support the senator in the primary. You know that they're with you. That doesn't help us, right? What we need to be doing is making sure that we're using the data provided by the campaign, right? Provided by the campaign through Vote Builder or something like that, that directs you where to go. So if someone is telling you to use Field to Burn or any of these other things while the campaign has arrived, I would advise you do not listen to them, because the campaign has access to data provided by local election commissions and whatnot to tell you exactly what neighborhoods to canvass, to give you the materials you need to do it. So if anyone's telling you to canvass without a walk list or without an updated walk list especially, or giving you any instruction besides just go randomly door to door, those are people you probably don't want to be listening to. Always be listening to what the campaign staff is telling you. I know it can be hard to change your ways once you're set in something. I know something might seem a little weird or uncomfortable for you, but these guys know what they're doing. Take their word for it. So yeah, canvassing captains are going to be doing the same kind of thing as phone banking captains. They're going to be making sure that they have people committed each day to hit certain neighborhoods for certain hours and to be generating data. So as the campaign approaches primary day, the campaign can focus on areas that it knows we needed to work on. You know, voters we haven't talked with yet, voters who are undecided, voters who we haven't had any sort of contact or a reason to believe they're supporting the other candidate. Or, it's basically a process of elimination. You're going through canvassing and phone banking to narrow out the people who will be supporting us, the people who are definitely supporting us, and the people who might be supporting us. And those people in that third group are the most essential people we interact with. And then there's the second group of people who are supporting us. We want to be bringing those people in as volunteers. So as a canvass captain, that is what you are trying to do. Again, I reiterate, Field to Burn is a great program. It's there's a lot of apps similar to it. Stuff like face banking, things like that. All that stuff is great in that previous stage when we're interacting with people and trying to find our network. But once the campaign arrives, use the programs they are asking you to use. Do not say, I'm not comfortable with this, I'm going to do this instead. Because Field to Burn and programs like it do not generate data that the campaign can plug into, right? This is all about being a funnel here. Okay, so phone banking and canvassing are the funnel so we can narrow it down to the voters we need to talk to and the voters we need to interact with. So please, again, it might be uncomfortable for you, but once the campaign starts providing instruction, I can't emphasize enough, use that instruction. So that's probably some of the roles you're going to have to fill as the campaign arrives and starts asking people, what are you comfortable with doing? What have you been doing up to this point? If you've been organizing and you have a lot of people, or even if you just have reliable people, you have a pretty good idea of who's good at what and who has experience with what. Those are the people you want to plug in from your volunteer organization into the campaign network, right? They will give you the materials you need. Don't worry, even if you're not experienced with it, as long as you're available and able to follow instruction, you'll do fine. Just don't commit to something if you feel like you cannot do it, right? That's the last thing you need is people signing up to be canvas leaders or captain leader or phone bank leaders or something like that, and then they can't make the hours they were assigned to, because then you're scrambling to find someone to replace them. So please commit to what you're comfortable with and what you know you can fulfill. So that's that. The last thing I'm going to talk about is GOTV, which is a program that almost every campaign uses. It's called Get Out the Vote. As you approach like the last 4 or 5 days of the primary, you're going to have be gearing everything up. This is the most critical time, right up to the day the polls open and during polls open. That's when you're going to have to be going to overdrive. You're going to have to make sure that you are making phone calls round the clock, that you are recording data, that you're canvassing people or making their margins, right? You want to make sure that every night before you have someone assigned to do a phone bank shift or someone assigned to do a canvass shift, you've called them and you've confirmed them. Okay, you want to make sure you have people who are reliable, people who are consistent. So if you call like Susan Q voter and she never shows up to volunteer, she might be someone you want to try and get off the list and move on to someone who might actually be able to fill up their shifts. Okay, don't worry about upsetting people as long as you're polite, as long as you're nice. There's nothing wrong. You don't want to force people to commit to something that they can't actually fulfill the commitment with. That being said, get out the vote. Okay, so you have 4 days. You got to make sure that you have a couple things and you have the resources you need. So what you're going to need is you're going to need completed, or not completed, you're going to need up-to-date walk list, right? The campaign should be providing you with these. You got to make sure that your canvassing people understand how to fill out a walk list. You got to make sure that your canvassing people turn the walk list in on the day they go out, right? Because that data is constantly being refreshed, it's constantly being updated, and it's useless to the campaign if they can't update it so that we can eliminate what houses we visited and what houses we didn't visit. Same thing with phone banking, right? I don't know personally what the problem was, but we have a suspicion that some people weren't entering in the data that they needed to enter when they were phone banking. So we ended up doing things like calling households that we've already called, 4 or 5 times that day. At that point in phone banking, if you're calling from a volunteer list, you want to make sure that you're eliminating people who can commit to stuff and putting them on shifts, filling out the shift worksheets they'll provide you with, and getting those people committed to filling something out. And the people who can't make it, getting them off the list. Your staging director, who's going to be the campaign guy who's helping you do all this stuff, they will be clear and they will be concise, hopefully, about how you do these processes. Just make sure that they are done and make sure everyone who's involved with them understands how they work and how to remove that stuff and that data. Because otherwise, we're just cycling through the same stuff over and over again. That's valuable time we could be using to reach out to new voters and new volunteers. GOTV is especially essential that you make sure that people are committed to doing those shifts, right? Right up to and during through the polls, you got to make sure that people are out there canvassing. You got to make sure people are making phone calls, and you got to make sure people are reporting their numbers. That's essential throughout this entire process up to the GOTV period. But you got to make sure that data entry is going on when it's scheduled to go on, that it's accurate when it is scheduled to go in, and that you know you can that you review it so you have an idea as you approach GOTV. What kind of numbers you've been hitting and whether you're going to be able to fulfill shifts. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, I apologize. Couple more things. This is just kind of freestyling it. So, for those of you who haven't organized before, don't worry. If you're a first-time volunteer watching this and you're wondering what you can do to help, the best thing I can tell you to do is take a look around on Facebook or stuff like that. You'll probably be able to find local volunteer networks that have been around for a while, that are experienced with this kind of stuff, and have their ear to the ground as to what the campaign's doing. So if you're out there in the wilderness and you haven't found a group yet, search Facebook for like a Bernie for this county group or something like that, or this county for Bernie or whatever, and you should be able to find local people you can be involved with. Other things. If you are in a volunteer network where there has been some disagreements or some personal animosity between one guy or another, something like that, I urge you to leave all that stuff behind. It doesn't matter who is right, who is wrong, when or what. When the campaign arrives, you got to be able to operate succinctly and synchronized together. Even if you don't personally like each other, there's a lot at stake here. And you can win your county or your area and thus your state if everybody is able to put aside personal differences and get along, right? We all got to work together, and our job as volunteers, organizers, what have you, is to make sure that when the campaign arrives in our area, they're able to plug right into our network, they're able to put us to work, they're able to give us goals that we can meet, and we're able to fulfill them, and we have to be able to get along with each other to do that. So I urge everyone to put aside differences as the campaign arrives so that we can all work together and get the results we need. Anything else? I think that's about it for now. So if there's any questions or any insights or anything that you guys feel like I missed here, feel free to leave a comment below. If the campaign wants me to take this down or correct me, feel free to do it. I will remove it immediately. That being said, there's a lot of talk about what just happened in the Midwest. I want to reiterate that we performed very well in the states we expected to perform well in. Sometimes we passed expectations. Like I said, I come from a very red county. We didn't expect to win. We did anyway. So don't be discouraged. Keep going. We can win the coming states. It's just essential that volunteers organize, commit to what you're trying to do, and don't be afraid of the results we've had so far. We're doing very well. We've gone way farther than anyone else ever thought we did, and I sincerely believe we can still win the presidency. But we have to be organized, we have to be together on this, and we have to be focused. I know we can do this. Come on, everybody. Viva la revolution and feel the burn.